Well, to me, he's so much. He's, first of all, the reason I have a job. He's the father of the electric guitar. He's the father of multi-track recording.
Richie Sambora once began with these words, a tribute to the figures who defined rock. But what few realized for decades was the behind-the-scenes tale between him and Gene Simmons, one of rock's most powerful figures. It was about a secret offer, a secret audition, and a choice that might have entirely altered the history of rock. Richie Sambora exposed this reality years afterward, remaining mum for decades, and when the whole story surfaced, the fans understood how close the world was to witnessing Sambora not as the guitarist of Bon Jovi, but as part of Kiss. In those times, Kiss was already a behemoth of the worldwide rock scene, not merely a group, but a franchise, a skillfully composed music, image, and business empire. Simmons, ever the planner, had his eye out for a new spark to add to the band's lineup and saw it in Richie Sambora. This was not a recommendation filtered through a manager or spoken quietly in a green room. Simmons went directly to Richie with the offer. There was no question about respect. He booked a private audition at a New York studio, complete with everything, and Kiss members and management came to watch. Richie was asked to perform not only the band's iconic riffs, but his own songs too, so they could gauge both his capacity to fit into Kiss's style and his creativity. By the conclusion of it, Simmons was persuaded. He informed Richie he possessed talent enough to propel Kiss to the next level. A contract was prepared. It involved rigid touring routines that took months to traverse continents, recording commitments and controls of image and public life by management. Simmons's band was an international machine, and whoever was coming in had to become part of it. The temptation for Richie was overwhelming, millions of people worldwide fame, and the support of one of the most structured rock operations on the planet. But the cost was steep. Creative independence was greatly limited, image control was tightly maintained, and individuality came after the greater Kiss image. Richie Sambora couldn't live with that. Musical freedom was everything to him. The choice to turn it down was hard, but quick. He knew he was leaving behind one of the largest launching pads in music, but he also knew he'd be losing the independence that made him a player. Simmons respected the decision, though not without a sense of loss. He went on to admit that Richie was one of the few musicians who could have so easily walked onto any world stage. For Richie, the decision was a gesture. An artist needs to follow the road that enables them to stay true to themselves. That daring move became part of rock lore, recalled not as a lost opportunity, but as testament to creative bravery. The road he took instead took him right into the arms of Bon Jovi. Soon after rejecting Simmons, Sambora was recruited by the band as they looked for a new guitarist to take the place of Dave Sabo. It was an instant chemistry with John Bon Jovi. Right from the first rehearsal, there was no doubt they shared a sense for melody, rhythm, and songwriting that was accessible, yet never sacrificed the essence of rock. Richie immediately started co-writing with John, assisting in the creation of the songs that would become the sound of Bon Jovi, hard rock with pop sensibilities, built for arenas but emotionally resonant enough to reach millions. Richie's riffs and solos were integral, and his harmonies reinforced the backing vocals that gave Bon Jovi choruses their explosive energy. He was not merely a guitarist, he was a co-creator of the band's identity. The commercial results spoke for themselves. Albums that sold in the millions, tours that filled stadiums worldwide, and songs that became anthems of a generation. Beyond the music, Richie brought his own style to the band's image. His fashion sense, stage presence, and natural connection with audiences helped cement Bon Jovi's reputation as one of the most engaging live acts in the world. The collaboration of John and Richie was legendary, a musical siblinghood which led the band through decades of success. Retrospectively, Richie's turning down Kiss appears less of a gamble and more a fate. But even the shiniest pages eventually change. In 2013, when Bon Jovi was still in its peak of international hegemony, Richie Sambora surprised everyone by leaving the band in the midst of a huge tour. The reasons were complex and deeply emotional. The exhaustive tour schedule, months on the road, night after night of nerve-wracking performances, had drained his energy and sapped his health. He missed balance, time with daughter Ava, who required his attention during those years. Creative tensions were also building. Sambora felt his input was being watered down, with parts of his guitar work being altered or cut without debate. The collaborative fire that once characterized Bon Jovi was waning for him. Adding to all this, he was also fighting addiction to alcohol and painkillers, a product of years of stress combined with personal challenges. He quit the band and got treatment, knowing that it was no longer just an option but a necessity for his health and survival. In subsequent interviews and a 2024 documentary, Richie described that he had to reclaim a platform where creativity reigned supreme and contributions were equally appreciated. Bon Jovi had provided him with a career and a legacy, but it was no longer the platform upon which his soul could flourish. The choice was regretful, but it was also a matter of self-preservation. He departed not in bitterness but in gratitude, constantly keeping memories and accomplishments as an inseparable entity of his life. Following Bon Jovi, Richie went towards solo ventures, collaborations, and humanitarian efforts. Liberated from the boundaries of a worldwide machine, he experimented with sounds and concepts that had been pending in the sidelines. He gave smaller, intimate performances where he was able to reach out to fans at a personal level. He collaborated with other musicians, trying things in multiple genres, rediscovering his creative spark. For Richie, it was not about pursuing the same arena-level glory. It was about experiencing again the thrill of playing music for its own sake, without compromise. Supporters recognized in him not only a rock celebrity, but a human being opting for sincerity over glare, and such an option made his tale resonate all the more powerfully. However, the friendship between Richie Sambora and Gene Simmons never went away. Their connection dated back even prior to the covert Kiss audition. Simmons initially spotted Richie at a New Jersey concert, impressed by his style and guitar playing. They exchanged brief words, with Gene vowing to monitor his career. They would meet again over the years at concerts, festivals, and award ceremonies, always exchanging conversations pertaining to music, fashion, and the business. A particularly memorable moment came in the mid-1990s at a Los Angeles charity concert where they performed a blues number together. Simmons's powerful bass lines merged with Richie's melodic guitar in a way that surprised and delighted audiences. It was a reminder that despite their different worlds, their musical spirits could connect beautifully. Later at festivals and after-gig parties, they went on talking, Gene usually stressing brand development and self-discipline, Richie championing creativity and liberty. Their views differed, but respect prevailed. As late as 2025, they were featured together on a podcast where they discussed their careers, the changes in the music business, and what they'd learned. They did not discuss the Kiss offer at length, but their rapport was clear, an indicator that they maintained their relationship for decades. Gene Simmons, of course, was still as provocative as ever. Notorious for his candid views, he once declared rock is dead and found himself widely condemned. For Gene, it was the death of the old business model. Fans were not funding emerging bands like they used to. Richie, when questioned about it, dissented. Rock, he contended, was thriving, adapting, cross-pollinating with other styles and reimagining itself in new generations of artists. To him, Simmons's statement was a shock thrust rather than a fact. Where Gene tended toward the corporate Kiss empire, image, merchandise, upscale fan experiences, Richie remained dedicated to music itself, preserving the connection between artist and audience as a sacred thing. He admired Simmons's business acumen and discipline, acknowledging it was part of the reason Kiss had endured so long. But he knew that wasn't his route. Authenticity and creativity always trumped empire building in Richie's opinion. Though differing in opinion, both men had a certain respect for one another. Gene admired Richie's musicality and versatility. Richie respected Gene's strategic thinking as well as his capacity to be his own story in an unforgiving business. Their tale wasn't one of competition or regret, but of two musicians who took different paths but left their own permanent impressions. The lost collaboration between Richie Sambora and Kiss is one of the enduring what-ifs in rock history. If Richie had taken Simmons up on his offer, the whole history of Bon Jovi, and perhaps Kiss, too, would have been different. But in taking his own route, Richie not only carved out his niche in history, but contributed to the formation of one of the greatest bands of all time. And Gene Simmons, even through regret, admired the choice as the trademark of an artistic soul unwilling to sacrifice his own. Separately but together, their entwined but distinct paths illuminate the soul of rock itself. Not fame, not image, but determination, vision, and perseverance in staying on one's own path. For Richie Sambora, the path never was about being engulfed in another's empire. It was about crafting his own legacy, note by note, riff by riff, song by song. For Gene Simmons, it was empire, strategy, and might. Both methods influenced generations, both left legacies, and both, in one sense or another, embodied the hard-nosed, unflinching nature of rock. Richie Sambora's decision to leave Kiss before ever joining it proved to be one of those rare crossroads moments when fate makes itself known. When he replaced Bon Jovi, he wasn't plugging a gap, he was entering a band that was still searching for who they were. With Sambora on board, that crystallized. Wanted dead or alive, living on a prayer, and You Give Love a Bad Name bore his fingerprints everywhere. His playing wasn't flashy merely for the sake of flashing. It had a purpose, intended to raise choruses to greater heights, to add grit to verses, and to allow songs the cinematic scope that enabled them to resonate with listeners all over the world. Richie spent hours co-writing with John Bon Jovi in marathon, late-night sessions, exchanging lines and riffs, until finding melodies that were memorable and emotionally resonant. This chemistry was rare, and it became the engine behind Bon Jovi's global rise. What separated Bon Jovi from many of their peers was their ability to cross borders, not just geographically, but musically. During an era when hard rock bands tended to be labeled as either too heavy or not heavy enough, Bon Jovi was successful at merging raw guitar power with songs that could be sung in stadiums on the radio, and even at family reunions. Richie Sambora was the key to this balance. His blues-inspired background provided their songs with depth and emotion, while his technical abilities made for arena-filling solos that excited fans. And his vocals tend to harmonize with John's, were an underutilized secret weapon. Those epic choruses, the ones that shook entire stadiums, were thanks to Richie's harmonies. It's not an overstatement to say that without Sambora, Bon Jovi may never have attained the worldwide dominance they did. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Bon Jovi tours became the stuff of legend. They weren't concerts, they were cultural phenomena. Richie adopted the road life, but it was not without a price. The circular pattern of writing, recording, touring, and marketing wore him out. What the public viewed as glamour and success, in reality, was sheer pressure. Sambora, as most rock players of his generation, was fighting fatigue and the vices of fame. Drinking turned out to be the escape, and soon painkillers joined the mix. For years, Richie continued striving, never willing to disappoint his bandmates or the millions of people who viewed Bon Jovi as a band, but also as a part of their life. But behind the scenes, cracks were beginning to form. By the time 2013 rolled around, the choice to walk away wasn't an impulsive one. It was the result of years of inner turmoil. Richie adored his band, but adored his daughter more, and his own health enough to understand that he couldn't keep going the way he was. For fans, the news was devastating. How could a person leave one of the world's most successful bands in the middle of a huge tour? But for Richie, the reasons were clear. He had to pick life over legacy. In subsequent interviews, he was candid about his travails, acknowledging that he'd struggled with addiction, loneliness, and creative frustration. It wasn't about quitting the band, it was about rediscovering himself.